Thanks for joining me, Philippe. It's super exciting to have you here. In this segment, we're going to be talking about business model innovation, right? Specifically on the axis of the series that we both love, fans and customers, right? How do you sort of build engaging communities? How do you sort of move away from transaction-based engagements with your customers and move to that sort of relationship-based view? But before I talk about that, I just want to kind of understand a bit about you, your background at Warner Brothers.
So my day-to-day job is very, very varied, but effectively it's ensuring that we work with partners to have our brands coming to life in products, in experience across the region, and connecting with fans on a daily basis.
When did you first encounter the concept of fans, not customers? And what does it mean to you personally?
Through our affinities with bands, with sports, football teams, baseball teams, whichever sport you follow, you become a fan of that team, of that nation, and you really emotionally connect with them. And I think for me, that's been the starting point of that journey. Yeah. And we have that one single thing that brings us together, which is that fandom for that brand. The Flash, I love The Flash. I absolutely love it. But I've got also a lot of emotional connections, to the likes of Looney Tunes, because these were the characters I encountered when I was a child. Yeah. And I think, that brings you that level of comfort, that familiarity, that emotional connection that no other, entertainment brand can do. In everything we do, we have to make sure it's right for the fans, because you don't get a second chance with the fans. Yeah. You have to be right or not. And if you're not right, the fans will think that you're fake, and they will not carry on staying on that journey with you.
I love the point about emotional connection. Let's sort of unpack that, because I think there's two sides of it, right? There's the emotional connection with your end customer.
Yes.
But there's the other side, which is your employees, right? Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, that's your first line of defense. How do you empower your employees? How do you empower your partners to deliver customer experience that is unique, that leaves that lasting emotional connection, and recognizes the value of building these fan ecosystems?
It comes with a shared responsibility that everything we do works to the benefit of the brand. Each of us have got a responsibility. It's having that shared responsibility and that shared ownership as well, that, it's not my colleague's responsibility, but it's our collective responsibility and my personal responsibility. And having that emotional connection is incredibly powerful, because through everything we do, whether you work in finance, whether you're in legal, whether you're in marketing, in creative services, product development, whether you try to source new partners, you have to make sure you live and breathe that brand emotionally, but also functionally. So how do you manage to get the right balance with potential new partners and existing partners on what is going to be the next great product we're going to bring to fans?
Right.
You have to be able to actually translate the essence and the DNA of the brand onto the product itself. It becomes really, really symbiotic. And where we see actually the biggest results is when we are able to translate that DNA onto a product. So, we do it extremely well, in particular, with our friends at Lego.
And when you talk about the DNA of a brand, which I think is quite interesting, it's almost a self-selection process. You accept that there's some people that will not resonate with what you're doing. How do you manage that, right? Because ultimately, the idea of fandom is that this is targeted to a group of people and they will stay with me for life. But then some people are not going to be on that journey, right? How do you reconcile that to ensure that you focus on the people that you really want to focus on and not just a broad blanket?
Retaining them for life is already quite complex. And I think what we have to do, we have to understand how it evolves, but give fans a spectrum of options for them to be able to connect with a brand through a multiplicity of products and products that are relevant to them. And I think, you will not be surprised if I say to you that we use a lot of data to kind of unravel
Of
those
course.
preferences. We also stay connected. We understand, NPS, consumer sentiment for the brand across a broad spectrum of ages. But it's very complex. My job is to make sure that, my group and the partners we work with offer that spectrum of
Sure.
products to reflect the DNA of a brand.
What key lessons have you learned in like fostering, growing, sustaining that mindset in your ecosystem, particularly in your people, but then also in the partners that you onboard, right? Because they're still part of your ecosystem that creates value.
You need to be consistent. You need to be authentic. And there's no room for error. and that's the reality of it, because, you're a fan. And you know that if, your favorite band, if your favorite club lets you down, you're going to be quite annoyed about it. And I think your emotional relationship with the brand is going to suffer, for a while. So for us, having that consistency, that authenticity, and that approach, rigoristic approach on delivering what the fans want is really, really critical.
When you talk about authenticity, what does that mean though to you in this context? Because for me, authenticity is everything, right? Like I live and die by that.
I think it's all hinges for me on trust and the trust relationship that you set up with people. Ultimately, if I'm hiring you tomorrow to come and work for Warner, I put my trust in the fact that what you're telling me is right, your fandom is right. I think, that authenticity is fundamentally based on trust for me. And I think I've got to be able sometimes to walk away from some businesses because that actually that authenticity is not right. And we've done that in the past. We've walked away from multi-billion businesses which were easy money, but they weren't right for the brand. They were not right for the brand because the fans would have seen through it, and the fans would have said, what you're doing is not right. Being authentic is also being able to say, I do understand the imperative of your business and my business, but we have to be genuine in our conversations.
Stand for something, values, beliefs, whatever it is, DNA, and you protect it, right? I want to talk about your impressive slate of brands.
We've got millions, and sometimes billions of fans around the world. So that's something we're really, really proud of. I think what's really exciting is, for us to be able to connect the right brand with the right fans. We also always have to be very, very nimble, to be very fast, and to make sure we always connect the right fan community to each brand.
Sure.
Because once again, some of them attract billions of fans, like Batman, like Harry Potter. They've been number one for awareness in probably 60-70% of the world population, which is, an incredible feast in itself. But you've got, more marginal brands, brands which are appealing to smaller fan communities.
Yeah.
And we also have to offer, products to those fan communities.
So I think agility in the business model is critical, but also understanding that you're not in a linear relationship. You're in a loop. And it's how do I ensure that I'm connecting all parts of that value chain constantly together.
That relationship is always there. You always have that relationship with the brand.
To have an agile business model, right, you need to understand where and how to meet your customer in a very responsive way.
Lego nurture that relationship. They've got, avid fans of Lego, the AFOLs, and they nurture those communities. They look after them, but they also use those communities as a source of inspiration through, some of the product range they have that they call ideas, which comes from those communities as well. So it's a great model. And I think for anyone who's had, some visibility on the way the Lego ecosystem operates, it's a frictionless ecosystem that brings you a wealth of opportunities as a fan.
Business model, transactional to getting fans engaged. What sort of other businesses are you seeing doing this fandom really well?
I think there's one which is a bit more established now, the German luggage manufacturer, Rimowa, where, oh my goodness, you go around the world, you see people with the silver suitcases. You've got that fan community, and you just have to look at the people and you know you belong to that community. And I think that relationship
That's pretty
is
cool.
so powerful. But you always have, that sense of being part of that community.
Yeah.
And I think they do it really, really well because they do it, in a very frictionless way.
I've heard you mention several times community, right? How do you measure community? How do you sort of drive that connection and also educate that ecosystem, your people, your partners, to have the same mindset?
I think having that clarity of vision on where you want to be is really critical. And the softer element, which I wanted to overlay on that, because you've got the metrics, is what problem are you trying to solve? Because ultimately, we're bringing products to consumers, to fans, because they're not getting what they need or they're not getting what they want. Starting with the end in mind is making sure that along that path you don't get distracted.
Yeah.
Yes, you can go a bit right, a bit left, but you know where you're heading towards. And developing a set of metrics that are going to allow you to measure whether your ultimate objective is achieved or not is critical. And increasingly in our business, if you can't measure it, don't do it. Because how do you actually define success? Success is an emotional element in terms of the connection you have with the fans.
I love that. If you can't measure it, don't do it. Thank you, Philippe.
Thank you, Peter.